This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I speak with artist Stefan Brüggemann about his artistic journey, the power of words, truth versus fiction, and his latest show titled White Noise, up now through January 14th of next year at Hauser Wirth's 901 East 3rd Street location in downtown Los Angeles. Later in the conversation, Stefan and I are joined by Sebastien Montabonel, whose digital platform, The Island, has collaborated with Brüggemann to create on-chain artworks that leverage aspects of conceptual and generative art. And now, a conversation about headlines, last lines, and exits with artist Stefan Brüggemann. Stefan Brüggemann, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Art Sense podcast. Usually with artists, I like to start with a hypothetical, which is, let's say you're at a dinner party, seated next to someone who has absolutely no idea who you are, and they ask you what you do. How do you explain to them the scope of your work and what it consists of?
Well, when I'm in those situations, I always say I'm an artist. No, I don't like to specify if you're a painter, a sculptor, or a performance artist. I always like to think of myself as an artist because I like to explore different mediums. So sometimes I like writing, sometimes it's painting, sometimes it's an installation, a sound piece. So yeah, I would just say maybe I would sometimes add visual artist.
If you were to try to describe what your visual artwork looks like, how would you start to describe it to someone that hasn't seen it? Beyond opening up your phone and pulling out a photo, where would you start to describe your work visually?
Well, I would say it's a work that deals with words as a center point of is the core of all my practice, but also the contradiction with the gesture. So it's about literature and abstraction and the tension that builds up. And I could add that it's very text-based and using text in different shapes and forms, like maybe handwriting and also a text written in a computer. So I will think of it in that direction. And I would consider it something that it's influenced by conceptual art, but also from pop art and also from the punk movement in music. So that DNA of do-it-yourself and disrupting systems and trying to figure out how to do something out of nothing.
There's a strong component of words, and many times it's combinations of fragments. Can you talk a little bit about where you're gleaning all these words? Are you constantly reading? Are you listening? Where are you gathering your inputs?
Well, I think I am absorbing the context where the work is being made all the time. So I get influenced by things I hear people say, to things I read, to things I hear in different platforms like the radio, to the news, the media, music also, and literature. So I think I get influenced by all these sources all at the same time, and not being looking for something specific. It's not like doing research. It's more just like absorbing and understanding the context, and then it's a very existential process where words start to connect to each other, and suddenly I build up this body of work called text pieces, where are reduced poems or statements or truisms that are built up with all this influence of things that I absorb, and then suddenly I start building my own semantic and trying to unpack the words and feel them and also hear them, and then I come up with a very precise concept for each text piece. And then there's another way I work with text that is more present in the series I have called Headlines and Last Lines in the Movies, where I appropriate the headlines that I'm listening to at the time that I'm executing the work, and then I have a list of last lines in the movies of dramatic films, from Citizen Kane to a present film, and then I start, like juggling with it and doing like a copy paste, control copy, control paste activity, and suddenly I start figuring out what the words are resonating.
I've heard that some of those headlines, in terms of timing, you're pulling those like right up to the time that you're exhibiting the work. Is that an important aspect to you, for it to be?
It's the most important aspect, no? In the sense that the moment I executing the painting with the spray writing on different surfaces, that could be canvas, mirror, marble, plywood. At the moment I'm executing the work, I don't analyze too much the headlines, but it was resonating more to me at that precise moment for a very intuitive perception, more than unpacking it on a political agenda or a comment I want to support or not support. It's more just trying to get the noise of that instance, of that precise moment.
It struck me when I was looking at the headlines and last lines that headlines are often really alarmist, and last lines in movies can like assure us that everything is going to be okay. But I don't know if either are necessarily the truth. I mean, can you talk a little bit about truth in fiction, truth and lies per se? Because I know that's even wording that you've used in some of your work.
No, for instance, specifically on the headlines and lines in the movie, my idea was that fiction and reality blend, no? Like the narratives of a script and the narratives of a headline, you don't know what is fiction and what's real. Like I kind of like how always the headline is opening up the narrative of something, and in the movie is like the conclusion of something, no? But that in betweenness is what it's confusing in terms of what is real or what is fictional. So I kind of like that those two precise practices, the media and the film industry, really shape our ideas of how to behave in the world. No, they really unconsciously manipulate how we need to cry, how we need to live, what is success, how we have to behave in certain communities, who's good, who's bad. No, so that's why I like this idea of the erosion in the narratives. No, how slowly they shape you without you knowing it. No, without you even thinking they're shaping you. So I think there's no good and bad. No, there's no black and white. At the end, it's a mix of everything, and we all participate in the sense.
You currently have an exhibit that's launching at Hauser and Wirth's location, the 901 East 3rd Street location in downtown LA. And some of that work has been made over the course of the last 3 years since the last U.S. election. I feel like it's very timely in responding to specific events around this ambiguity of the truth and relativism. Can you talk a little bit about how this work has been, shaped in this context? And do you think of yourself as someone who makes work that has a political response?
It's very important what you just said. The reason I did this series of paintings, that the series is called The Final Mess. I was painting during a week before Inauguration Day, when things start to destabilize, and there was such a uncertainty of where things were going to be taken. For me, more than a political position, was like a moment of uncertainty that maybe all the world was living at a precise moment. No, it's like feeling all of us an earthquake at the same time. No, it was something that it was resonating. So I thought it was an important phenomenon. No, like an important, and I wanted to do a body of work that expressed that speed of information and the speed of uncertainty, the speed of confusion, the speed of anxiety that all that created, and less interested in who's going to win, who's right, or who has the truth or who has the lie. It was more an observation of the mess we're all in, no, as a participants and as a phenomena. But I don't believe I'm doing a work that is propagandistic or preaching. Mm-hmm. It's more just laying out the issues we have, no, and that I hope that in the future this work helps understand in a very personal way that specific moment that it was nurtured by a lot of speed. That for me, that was what it was quite interesting. And how that velocity of information and uncertainty, just in a period of a week, felt like a year. No, I was painting one painting a day, and the information was coming every minute, every second, and so I kind of like that reduction of time and the expansion of time. No, it was like timeless at the same time, no, because you lost track of where you were.
I read an article recently where, you're quoted as saying the work of an artist absorbs its context and surroundings and then expresses it, leaving no footprints. It's a response. It's a reflection. Is that the hope?
Yeah, and more of a reflection of a feeling, no? Because you don't have enough time to really unpack it all, and really, once an event happens, you have more time to really digest it and understand it. It's more like trying to be there, no, absorbing the feeling of it.
Being an artist from Mexico, I mean, you now live and work out of London, but your worldview was shaped in Mexico. I feel like a lot of your work comments on what I think you've referred to as like a capitalist structure. Can you talk about the worldview that you bring to your work and maybe the commentary? For example, you grew up Mexican, your native language is Spanish, but the text in the majority of your work is English, and specifically an American form of English. Is it tied to the fact that if we are making comments on capitalism, America is kind of seen as the capital of capitalism?
It's a very complex question in the sense that I'm half German, half Mexican. I lived in Mexico, raised in a British school system, and also in a political period where neoliberalism was the narratives of the governments, and there was all this idea that you needed to speak English to be part of the world. You needed to know how to use a computer. You needed, you wanted to be part of this first world and the beginning of globalization or that project. And I find it quite interesting because at the end, specifically in my situation, I'm a collage of lots of things. No, like I cannot really say I'm European or 100% Mexican. I mean, I feel like I'm part of everywhere and part of nowhere. No, so it's in this period of time, you can travel as much as you can, and you're in lots of places at the same time. I have 3 locations in the world where I live constantly, plus all the places I travel. So I think it's a reflection of a contemporary position in the world, no, in my specific case, no. So that's why I think English came very naturally to me, because I wanted to speak to this global world, no, and that was the currency, no, like English is a currency, and on top of that, the sound of it and visually, I'm attracted to it. Maybe because all my teenager period, I was listening to punk music and music in English, and like it was influenced by that. So that informs you and that fits you, and it's reflected in my work.
Tell me about the use of gold leaf. You've been using reflective surfaces for a while. There seems to be more gold leaf in some of this work from the last 2 or 3 years. What influenced or what attracted you to the gold? I mean, was there a specific symbolism that you were hoping to impart there?
I first started using the gold leaf like in 2008, a little bit. It attracted me for, I don't know what a specific reason, but when the period of the lockdown came, and I was producing work, I went deep into using it, no, because suddenly that material gave me some elements that I thought resonate a lot of what I was thinking and feeling, of that uncertainty in the world that we all had to go through, in terms of a shutdown of the economy and the loss of faith, no, because when there's no solution and death is in front of you, your spirituality is also in a crisis, no, and I think these two issues of economic power and spiritual power were in crisis, and I think the gold leaf is a material that symbolizes the spirituality and the economical power. And so symbolically, that made sense to me. And formally, what I am interested of the gold leaf is when you apply it in a surface, because of its luminosity and its formal qualities, it amplifies the surface and it amplifies light. So it's not a material that it's covering, but it's a material that it's amplifying the surface. So I think those are the reasons why I was attracted. And obviously, it's not a material that has not been used in the history of art. No, you have all the Baroque period, all those churches that in Mexico, you have lots of Baroque churches, and you see all these ornaments all with are all gilded. And then sometimes in contemporary art, you've seen artists used it, like Cunelis or James Lee Byers. But I was more influenced by a Mexican-German artist called Matthias Geritz, that started using doing these paintings monochrome with gold leaf and titled them Messages. And they were done in the 40s, 50s. So I think those are my influence regarding the use of gold.
You've done this concept of an exit door before, and there's a version in the show at Hauser and Wirth that's gold leaf. It's called Exit Door in Gold We Trust. For those that haven't seen the piece before, it's your typical backstage exit door. It doesn't open. It's an emergency exit, but it's non-functioning, right? That's the paradox. For me as a viewer, I look at it and, we think that there's the way out and there's hope, but the paradox is that, for most of us, the exit is a false promise. I guess we are all open to our own interpretations of these things, right?
Yeah, but I think it goes around those lines. For me, the idea of an exit door is an existential question, no? Because it's a door that it only allows to get you out, but you cannot come back. So is that decision making you have to take, no? That is part of our daily life, no? You always making decisions, and also the work deals with the idea of the ready-made and the tradition of ready-made. And I am presenting you a door that it's a door, but it's a non-functional door. But then it creates that confusion for you that you don't know what you're looking at. It generates doubt, like if it's a door or if it's not a door, why it's gilded in gold leaf. And so it starts an existential problem. And then obviously with the title, I reference what I was doing during the lockdown with the gold paintings, which is changing a little bit, like the idea of in God we trust, in gold we trust. No, it was a little bit of irony and gesture.
The more I hear you talk about that, it feels a little bit like Magritte's, this is not a pipe, this is not a door.
Actually, the first time I exhibited was a stainless steel exit door, polished, so it looked like a mirror, and it was placed in the gallery in a corner where you would place an exit door, and the title was "This is not an exit door." So I think it makes sense what you're commenting on.
I've talked to William Kentridge, who has a similar process. He's constantly reading and taking pieces of text and juxtaposing them and putting them back together and taking inspiration. There's a part in that process where you're almost working as a cut-up poet, like a William S. Burroughs, in that you're taking these things and putting them back together. I mean, do you have that sense of the poetic in what you're doing since there are so many words?
No, I think it's a good reference, what you're saying about William Burroughs. Obviously, it has a great influence and impact. But I think he was a visionary in that sense, because for me, I think we believe in a generation of control, copy, control, paste. No, the amount of just cutting a little bit of copying this part of the text, sending your text, or just copying the text that you received with WhatsApp and then you send it to somebody else, and now even worse with artificial intelligence, where now you don't even have to do the action of the copy paste. A computer will do it for you, because at the end it's just appropriation and just searching for the appropriation. So I think it's very reflective of that, and I like that poetry. No, I like how, poetically speaking, that also brings something new to the text. No, so it's a new way of writing, a new way of activating literature. No, so I think it's an important reference.
Stefan, a lot of times when I talk to artists, in the course of a conversation, it becomes obvious that they are employing tactics in their work that encourage the viewer to slow down and spend more time looking closely at the work. And, for some, that's minute details. I feel like some of that's at play in your work, given the number of layers, the amount of layering that you do. Sometimes you break up text in ways that it almost looks like an eye chart, but your mind eventually pieces together the letters to see the words. But it's an invitation to slow down. I mean, do you consciously see that as part of your practice?
Yes, I see it, and that's also the way I do it. No, so the work is done very fast, but to get to the moment of the execution takes a long time. No, so it's like if you're a boxer and you're training for a year to go to the ring, and then in 1 minute you have to. So I kind of like to play with the different velocities of fastness, but then of contemplation.
Sure.
And yes, all the works are done in a way that when you confront them, you can just view them for 1 second and have that imprint, or you can start to unpack it and unpack it and unpack it and unpack it. And suddenly, for me, that's very important that the work can activate those two different velocities, the 1 second impact imprint and the long-term digging into it, and that you always trying to find something more and unpack it more and unpack it more, and more reference come around it. And that obviously provokes the viewer to contemplate, and especially for me is to see. I force them to see, like to look at things and to try to read them.
It makes me think of these pieces that you've done where it's a joke over a definition. From across the room, there's an aesthetic reaction to the piece because of colors and the different colors of the text. When you get up closer, there's so little contrast between the two texts that have been overlaid that you're really having to work hard to read one and then work hard to go back and read the other. I have always been in love with art that says one thing to you from across the room, but has a different payoff when you're 6 inches from it. Much like some of the works that you've done, which have been, simply contrast between, the matte versus the glossy on some of your texts, right?
Yeah, for instance, in that work that you're mentioning of the appropriation of jokes and definitions, I was appropriating also the artwork of Joseph Kosuth and Richard Prince, and juxtaposing it together. And what I was trying to achieve doing that was the idea of the contrast between logic and irony, which is the way to express ourselves. And then the third element that I'm adding, that what words cannot say, abstractions says it. No, so there's some things that words cannot explain. And so that's why abstraction is also very important. So he was carrying those three layers of vulgarity versus intelligence versus abstraction. No, so sure. It was very important for me always to do a lot of contrasts and contradictions to create the depth in the work.
We've talked some about materials in terms of gold leaf and the highly polished surfaces on the exit door before. You also are really closely associated with the use of spray paint. In this show at Hauser and Wirth, we've gone beyond maybe working on plywood surfaces to working on different types of stone slabs. Can you talk a little bit about some of the choices you make in materials, and maybe what we are supposed to receive as a result of you making some of these choices?
Well, the choices is exactly how you produce contrast. No, when you put black and white, you create a distance and a contrast. Also, that happens with materials. No, so in the specific case of the show at Hauser and Wirth, I'm exhibiting this body of work called eroded paintings, which are different slabs, all different stones, different colors, different type of veins, and then I'm applying spray paint on it, and so it's how a very solid material with a very fluid material like spray paint create that contrast and that tension, and symbolically also have this idea of transgression and disruption from something established like a stone that it's permanent, with a spray writing that most of the time is just like a big scream that sometimes it can be erased and it's not permanent. So I was playing with the solid and the fluid also in those regards. So for me, it's always very important to create contradiction and contrast. And the more contrast you produce, the more depth the work has.
I know spray paint, has a tie to street art, to graffiti. Is that an important tie for you? Does it feel like it ties your work to Vox Populi, or the voice of the people?
It talks to the voice of the people, but not to graffiti art or street art, because for me, street art is something made out of shapes and forms, and it's just using the street as a surface. For me, it's more ideologically and poetic, no? More or less, I'm more influenced by the writing in strike demonstrations, or all these different movements that are asking for a voice to be heard, and they're not aesthetically thought. No, it's more about the message, not about. And graffiti and street art is about the aesthetics. So for me, I'm bringing the street to the interior, to my own universe, but not aesthetically, but more conceptually and more poetically speaking, rather than formal.
Somewhere in my mind, it kind of makes a connection to Basquiat, when he was doing street art, was going by Samo, and he wasn't tagging art on the street, he was writing poetry on walls.
Exactly. I think that's a great difference, and I feel more connected to that than the tagging and the use of concept of street art. I think everything is street art, because at the end, you come to enter to see an artwork, you come from a street. No, it's very difficult to. Talking about established or not established, but at the same time, all the art is disruptive in essence. No? Now, street art has been tried to be pushed inside the institutions. So I'm not coming from that concept of street art.
You're also undertaking a project with an online digital platform called The Island. And I think you're also joined there by Sebastien Montabonel, who is the founder of The Island. The Island, from my perception, is a digital platform that commissions on-chain artworks from traditional artists. And so I was hoping that maybe Sebastien could explain how you're working with Stefan, because this is different. It's outside the gallery. It's on the blockchain. How are you guys working together?
Well, I think when we created The Island, I come from the traditional art world, so not really from the NFT industry or the tech industry. For me, what was interesting when we talk on-chain is that it's a new medium. And in contemporary art, new medium comes once every blue moon. And I thought that was extremely interesting. And The Island, that's what they are specializing. They are commissioning, and sometimes they are supporting artworks from established contemporary artists that's gonna deal with technology. And when the first commission was to deal with on-chain as a medium, then actually it's very complicated or very difficult to find an artist that understand that medium. And And because artists, they have an idea, they think for a day, a week, a year, 10 years, whatever, a lifetime. And what they like to give you, it's a finished product.
Right.
Yeah, they like to have full control. Where here, what we wanted to do, we didn't want a JPEG that is recorded on the blockchain, because for us, that doesn't mean anything. What we wanted is something dynamic, and we wanted where audience could engage with it as a participative piece, like we, in the 60s, that was really big. And of course, we wanted to be run by an algorithm. And Stefan is the perfect artist because he has no boundaries when it comes to medium. It's the idea that prime and after it can be generated across many medium. And then when we talked with him, straight away it was interesting. That was bringing something that he never explored before. And also he was very comfortable with the idea that his work will be done by a set of instruction because of his background of conceptual arts. And this was really, really important to the project. And these type of artists are extremely difficult to find. And then we trained the engine, AI, and that's what he liked, that it could be removed. That for the first time, his work, we could, the owner or the audience could engage, but participate to the creation of the artwork. And that's why it works together when we did that project.
There's a bit of a Stefan's take on something between Saul LeWitt and a generative NFT.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I built one of the most important collection in Europe over the last 10, 15 years of minimal and conceptual art. And Saul LeWitt, it's a big thing for me, of course, for Stefan. And the idea of a systems, the set of instruction, that's what you have when you were buying a wall drawing from Saul LeWitt. But in reality, when you go deep down in Stefan's practice and Saul LeWitt, it's always the idea that that's the prime things. And then after the idea evolved with the medium, it's interpreted differently. And that's why for the project that we wanted to do, it worked.
I guess the work takes on a number of forms. I mean, there's the work, but a big part of NFT project success is about engagement and token gating. What sort of world does this open up for me? And my perception is that buying a commission from this collection opens the door, maybe not necessarily the exit door, but it opens up a door to other experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, like, it's free series, right? And we sell them not as unique pieces, but in reality, it's free works. It's a full series that allow you to experience the full systems. And one of them, it's on hold because there's a very important museum that really like the idea. And that's the same, conceptually, it's very similar to Stefan's idea. Is they pre-select, or they have a set of instruction, they put it there, but they want, because of this idea that the institution needs to have this, to participate with the audience, to have the audience engagement. So the audiences will select the work that's going to enter into the collection by the idea of freezing the work when they think it's relevant, when for the audience they think this work is important because it's an important moment in time. Earlier on, we were talking about the work, the final mess that Stefan's done, where this time, Stefan allow the audience to decide themselves what is that moment that is historical. Is it because I got married on that day, or, I've got a kid, or is that because we think this thing is relevant? So when you acquire the artwork, you've got 365 days to decide when you think that moment is coming.
That's similar to the conversations I've had with like Tyler Hobbs about QQL, where you can see the different iterations that you can generate, but then at some point you decide this is the version that I'm minting, I'm keeping. This is what will be frozen in time.
Exactly. So in reality, what we've done via Stefan's instructions is that we have built an engine, that constantly running, where the information comes from different RSS feed, and then you, as a viewer, you decide. But Tyler Hobbs, we've done an interview together with Sol Lewitt, and a lot of that thinking is very similar. Exactly.
Stefan, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being willing to answer all my questions. I highly encourage people to come out and see your show at 901 East 3rd Street in downtown Los Angeles. The show opens September 15th and goes through January 14th of next year. And so there's a nice window. There are no excuses for folks not to come down to Hauser and Wirth. Folks are interested in the Island project. Probably the best place is to check out theisland.io. Again, I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck with all these endeavors.
Thank you so much. It was great speaking to you, and I hope to speak to you soon.
Absolutely. That's all the time we have for this week. You've been listening to ArtSense. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. And while you're there, please rate the show and leave a quick review. Your feedback is the key to other folks finding us. And if you'd like to see images related to the conversation, read the transcript, and find other bonus features, you can go to cambia.art and click on the podcast tab. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at craig@cambia.art. Thanks for listening.